I'm Rob Licuria, Senior Editor at Gold Derby, here with Slow Horses composers Daniel Pemberton and Toydrum, also known as Pablo Clements and James Griffith. Guys, first of all, congratulations are in order because you were recently nominated at the Ivo Novello Awards for Slow Horses Season 3. That is a really huge achievement. You guys must be super proud, so congratulations.
Thank you.
Thanks so much. Yeah, it's really cool. I think with this show, with the third series, I think people have really discovered the third series. You know, it kind of came a bit under the radar, so it's nice people finally have kind of cottoned on to what we're trying to do with the show.
Yeah. Yeah, isn't it interesting, guys, that you've been working on the show for a while and we're up to season 3, although I know that season 4 and I think season 5 are all in production or have been shot partly. It's nice that the world is catching up to Slow Horses because I must say I've been OG fan from the very beginning, but it's good that the whole world is now catching up to those of us who understood that this is a brilliant show. So congrats again on that nomination. It's always nice to get a pat on the back. So I want to go back to the beginning though, because it's something that I wasn't really able to find out just from doing my own research. And that is, Daniel, how did it come about that you would be working with Pablo and James and collaborate on this show together? Because yeah, that seems like a quite interesting pairing or pairing. I don't know how you would say it for 3 people.
Yeah, well, I mean, I didn't. There's a thing about doing TV series where it's a huge quantity of work, and I still like to try and write everything, and I don't try and pretend I write things and have a team of assistants who actually does it. And there's quite a lot of that's becoming more and more of a model of TV and film music, which is good for some people, but it's not really my kind of thing. So I always try and approach every project and really throw everything at it. And the difficulty with that is with TV is there's so much quantity of it that I have other films going on, so it's hard to give 100% to everything. So I was like, well, I'd like to find someone to work with to share like the workload. But the difficulty for me was I approach each project quite differently, and I wanted to find people to work with who I felt were I was slightly unconventional in their approach to music. And I've known Pablo and James for a long time. Pablo for an incredibly long time. Pablo used to DJ at some great clubs I went to when I was a teenager. And I've always really loved their approach. I think the thing that's interesting about Toydrum is that they've done a lot of scores that are slightly under the radar, but very sonically adventurous and sonically interesting. And for me, that's, they're coming from a different perspective to people who are just sort of workaday TV composers in a way. So I thought that'd be a really interesting pairing for me because we'd both bring something different to the process. And the way I wanted to approach the score was I didn't want it to feel generic. I didn't want it to feel conventional. I wanted it to have a very live, rustic, sort of slightly homemade quality to the score. And if you hear their work, they really fit in with that. It's a bit like casting an actor. I think if I was doing a show, that I need to do a very ornate classical score, I might not ask James and Pablo. I'm doing a score that needs like really interesting sonic approaches, really different ways of looking. Yeah.
Yeah.
So that's how we started working. We'd known each other for a long time, and we had a really great supervisor on the show called Catherine Greaves. And she kind of brought them together and suggested it, and that's kind of really how it came about.
Wow.
Yeah.
So James, what would you say that you and Pablo bring to the table, so to speak? I think Daniel has touched on it, and those of us who know your work, you and Pablo's work from previous iterations, Uncle, your DJing, and now Toydrum, I knew exactly what we were getting ourselves into as a fan. But what would you say that you both bring to the table in this collaboration?
I mean, I guess I mean, like Dan said, we brought, we usually try to approach everything very differently, and our sound naturally is usually pretty wonky and rustic, as you'd say. So
Chaos,
I think when
chaos, Queen of
Dan,
chaos.
no, but,
Yeah,
but
chaos.
again, what's that chaos? Yeah. But
Yeah.
yeah, it seemed right. I remember when we first started throwing ideas and Dan was sending us what he was doing and we were behind the scenes working on some stuff as well. It just seemed to slot in. I think, we have a studio down here with a lot of, broken instruments and again, stuff that the way we try to approach is making our own sounds, making our own instruments. Everything's homemade, and I think we have a lot of that. Like Dan, I think he knew when he was approaching this that like he said, we were gonna fit in quite well. I think so. But yeah, I mean, and now I think it took a little bit, but I think we really found our stride on three with how we work together, and it's more and more collaborative every time. Like instead of you do these tracks, I do these, we're all doing stuff on each other's, and it really evolved into that, which is great. It's been really good. Three was really great.
Yeah. Would you say, by the way, are you guys still, you're working, I guess, out of your studio in Brighton? Is that still the case? Yeah.
Yeah, for sure.
So Pablo, what would you then say that as a double-edged question from what I just asked, what have you most valued and enjoyed about working with Daniel on season 3 of Slow Horses?
Oh, I mean, every season has its own, I think, its own kind of things to get over, and the story. We approach everything, every story for each season differently. And I suppose what we do, like we come down, we have a few days of really kind of trying to crack that. We kind of think about it, would you say, before Dan? We kind of have this idea and of how it will be, because the story, I would never want to say too much whether anybody's seen them, but
No,
the
but
tone.
if you haven't seen Slow Horses season 3 yet, people watching this, just stop, go watch it, come back because we're gonna have.
Yeah, so there's a big part in this season where it's kind of in a bunker, and it always felt when we felt that this would be more electronic because it would really fit the tone of the coldness of it all, and to different seasons, and we kind of found this mad, really distorted like drum machine, which was really raw and it just kind of felt like it was quite cold and it felt like the brick walls in there and we do this together. We kind of try and find that approach, and every season we do that, and we'll be doing it again soon for the next one. But it's yeah, it's fun,
I think like you said, like having Dan come down, I think to our place, Dan's a little bit like a kid in a candy store because we just have different stuff that he has, and we're sort of used to our stuff. So when he comes down, he discovers things that we might have forgotten about, and it's a really nice process in that way, I'd say. So again, someone else comes and messes with your toys, they seem to approach them in a different way. So
I think one thing to say about James and Pablo Studio, which is like amazing, but I hope you don't mind me saying it's got a slight Slough House vibe to it.
Yes, that's what I was hoping. I was wondering. That's what I was getting to.
It's Shabby Road. Shabby Road.
We call it Shabby Road. Yeah, Shabby Road.
It's not like one of these kind of like the park style, super slick graphic interface. It's a load of mad instruments, all kind of seemingly wired, like by a electrician who's, I don't know how it works.
He's blind or something. Yeah.
Yeah. It works. It's got a really, it's got a very exciting, chaotic vibe, which really works for this show. So we talk a bit, like we do these meetings earlier with the directors, and we sort of talk about what the approach of the film or this series. We sort of ruminate on that a bit, and then we kind of come up with a half-assed plan, and then we basically jam the shit out of it in the studio for a couple of days until we start coming up with interesting ideas. that we feel will like feed through the series. We do loads of that. We record a bunch of stuff, and then we both escape back to our little studios.
Yeah.
And then that's when the sort of tag team element starts coming along.
Yeah.
I'll start working on stuff. They'll start working on stuff, and we just sort of carve it up. We both know things that we're, you know, things that we prefer doing or better at doing, and we just sort of jump between it all.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I love it how Shabby Road, man. That's something I think you should trademark that. You know what's really interesting? Like whenever I am interviewing composers, I listen to the score, I watch a bit of it again on the actual show, and then I try to come up with just from my perspective to see whether I'm close to what maybe your brief was. But I feel like the score is really dense, grungy, electronic, kind of sometimes messy, sometimes really quite tense and repulsive. And I found it to be very appropriate for the super fast pacing of the show. It's like a big part of your role is to maintain this momentum that the show has. It's always moving the story forward in a very quick way. Would it be fair to say, Daniel, that that is one of the aims that you have as composers in this show, to amplify the show's relentless pace?
Yeah, I mean, every season has a different energy, and season 3 definitely has this real arc over the 6 episodes, especially pushing towards the end when they're in the bunker. And it's, you know, one of the sort of big challenges is really trying to find how to create that sense of momentum, anticipation, and excitement through devices, like musical devices that don't feel like you've cliched and you've heard them a million times before. So that's where a lot of the experimentation early on between us all happens, where we try and find ways of sort of telling these musical stories in a different way. And it is about I think like the actual idea of the slow horses is very useful for us from a composing point of view, because they don't approach things in a conventional way. They don't approach things in a standard way. The way they do it is always a bit messy, and it's trying to get that through on the score. You know, if they were like really precision AI techie kind of guys, this score would sound completely different. But we're trying to capture the spirit of the characters and their attitude and the energy of the show, and it's good that we're still getting the, you know, the beats of an exciting film or drama, but we're just trying to do it differently.
Yeah, a lot of that would have to be, I assume, would have to do with the instrumentation. So Pablo, perhaps over to you guys. Can you give us some examples of the instrumentation that you deployed on season 3 that perhaps is stuff that we weren't really expecting or wouldn't expect to hear on a TV show like this?
I mean, two big things that we used was we had these mad metal. What would you say they are, James? What do you say they are? These kind of like drum bowls made with like, and you can bow them. I don't
They
even.
look like
Sputnik.
Sputnik.
Yeah, they look.
You know, Sputnik.
Yeah, yes.
Sputnik,
They're like homemade. Yeah.
Wow.
Vultures.
Yeah.
They're like Sputnik, the space rocket from the Russian.
Yeah, and
Yeah,
you can bow them with bows and resin, and
yeah,
so
so
that.
load and hits. Yeah, there's that.
Yeah. Then the Pulsar 23 by a company called Soma, which is this mad drum machine, which has nothing but like bicycle clips all over it. And it will never make the same sound twice. You know, you kind of get these things, and then I just sat down with it for days and it's like battleships, really, you know, like, and then you come up with stuff, and I mean, it's kind of like, and you just sample it and create it, and we use those. Those were kind of on this, I think that was 2, would you say, James? That was kind of big 2 things, and you Dan, like that we used on
Pizzicato, the what's the thing we used, like the bowed sandpaper on past guitar
Yeah, what
string?
was that? I thought it was a violin at first, but it's not.
There's a thing that's almost like sandpaper that we're using on guitar strings that gives it a bowed effect.
Oh, that's the Gizmotron. The Gizmotron, you mean? The Gizmotron.
Well, there's that,
thing...
and then that kind of sandpapery thing, and that gives a, like, again, it's about trying to find unusual textures and unusual approaches that you're not going to notice when you're watching a show, but it just makes it feel very different.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Like I noticed, for example, in episode 3, like probably to me the best episode of the season, and that's saying something because they're all great. Negotiating with Tigers opens with this subtle pizzicato. To me, it was a violin sound over an ambient bass, and it evoked like what you guys to me you do is that you kind of veer into the classic spy drama a little to give us the taste, but then you come back to this industrial grungy sound and a lot of the electronic sounds that we're expecting, particularly when River Cartwright, for example, is being chased out of the tube station or something. So I would just wonder, was there many opportunities in season 3, James, to meld a little bit more of the acoustic sound into this electronic vibe, or was this season way more predominantly electronic than usual?
Oh, I mean, I think we just had that pretty much the only electronics that really was that one thing, but everything else is pretty much acoustic. Wouldn't you say, Dan? Most things,
Yeah, but I
they
think the
use
Yeah.
approach
like
is quite
manipulated
electronic.
It
banjo and
surprises me, yeah.
Yeah.
yeah, I
It's
mean
like we have.
go ahead. Sorry, go ahead, Dan.
I think with this season in particular, the more we move towards the bunker, the dogs have a very particular sound, and their kind of assault on the bunker, which and the dog. You know, if you look at like the slow horses, that's definitely shabby, organic, messy. Dogs are supposedly a bit more organized and have a sort of a sort of military aspect to them.
Yeah.
So they're often represented by something that's a bit more together and contained, which is probably more the electronic side of things. So as we move on, you know, we get because we close and close this bunker thing, those two kind of worlds come together. Um, and you know, if you look at the very beginning, like the Istanbul opening, that's a very different vibe to this stuff later. But you know, we're very conscious about how the whole arc over the season works, so you can plant ideas early on and then pay them off in episode 5 or 6 or whatever.
Yeah.
Yeah,
That's
I mean, but I think a reason stuff never gets because we don't. It's not a full electronic score. It never
yeah.
gets super electronic. There's some bits in there, and like Dan was saying, stuff club. But most of the stuff, most of those sounds are from organic things that are just manipulated and sound.
Yeah.
Sometimes, you know, I mean, I've lost track of what the core of some of the stuff is after a while because it's like so messed with, and that's what's great because that's what they just become their own thing. So
Yeah.
Yeah, because
Yeah.
like some of the key sounds that you know, like bow wow wow sort of sound
Yeah.
in the
that's
Jagger
a
song,
banjo.
that's a banjo going through a sort of bunch of effects pedals, which is then being retreated through a sampler, and so a lot of it is about taking organic sounds and then remanipulating them through modern sampling electronic techniques.
Hmm.
Right. Yes, that makes a lot of sense as well. And it's all that stuff where as the listener and the viewer, a lot of it we don't even know what the instruments are or what the original sounds are. They've been sifted through a synth to give it something that's kind of otherworldly. And I felt like that a lot of season 3 to me was so mysterious. The sonic part of the show that I think that's really quite appropriate for a show that is always trading on mysteries and question marks and ambivalence in tone. So, final question for all of you, and that is, I think, appropriate for the three of you. And what is so different, or what makes music composed for a television series where it's ongoing, different to music that you might compose for other media, or for an album, or for live performance? What is it about TV that you find the most challenging and perhaps most rewarding? I guess I'll go to you first, Pablo, and then James, and then perhaps Daniel to finish it up.
So TV from, I mean, there's many different concepts of it, really. I mean, when you do comparing it to film, I mean, the different things that you have with it, you're usually working with different directors on different seasons, and maybe even when you're working on one show, I mean, you can be working with 3 different directors over the season, so you're always having that thing of dealing with someone differently. And that can always bring different challenges, you know, very different challenges to be honest, because some people like one thing, another, and you have to be the person that can kind of, I wouldn't say guard the texture of what you're trying to do, but make everybody happy and work with it. So it's very different to a film, for instance, because that's usually one person's view when you work with that person. And for doing an album, an album is the problem with doing albums. When you're doing TV and film, I suppose the walls that you work in, you make smaller because you have this kind of you kind of know what you have to do. You know what you have to do.
Yeah.
When you make your own album, these walls are so much wider. You know, you don't wear away. You know, so
yeah,
I suppose that's the differences for us, maybe, or me. You know, so
yeah. What about?
Well, I think TV, pretty much what you said, but also I think the sheer volume of music over the period that you have to keep evolving. Obviously, we're on to, well, we just finished 4, so we're on to whatever that is.
Five comes up before James.
Yeah, no, I'm just saying we're 24 episodes of 24 hours of TV.
Yeah.
So it's like you gotta keep evolving a sound over that long period of time, and that's one of the main things for me, I guess, is or that it's something that's the volume of what you have to do and try to keep it interesting for that period. Whereas everything else is, obviously it's a movie's 90 minutes, and obviously Dan will have more to say about that because he's done a lot more films.
He's done a few, yeah.
I mean, for me, I like every time I do any project, whether it's a film, TV show, video game, whatever, it's always like I'm trying to create a new world, like musical language for each project. So Slow Horses sounds very different to Spider-Verse, which sounds different to, let's say, Enola Holmes, or and so what I do like, first of all, you have to use your mind. Like, mindset is different in TV in that there is going to be a lot of volume that's going to come at you very fast. So there's very boring technical things of like trying to create a palette that you can work with quickly and deal with changes very quickly. Whereas with the film, there's huge resources. With this, we don't have the same level of resources. So we have to develop ways, it forces you into a corner, and that in some ways can make it more interesting if you're kind of clever about it early on. And what I really like about it is, on the first series, we kind of develop this sound and this tone. And then each series we get to kind of keep playing in that sandpit and keep developing it. And, for me, I can do a film and I really enjoy it, and then it's gone. I have to do another, unless it has a sequel, it's gone. So I never get to play in that world again. And what I like about Slow Horses is we've developed, you develop these techniques and these approaches, and you get to keep refining them. It's almost a bit like being an artist, and you do one style of painting and you just kind of keep refining that over your career, and you keep, I like doing lots of different things, but with Slow Horses, we get this opportunity to work within this one framework. We've built a cool language, and now it's like, how do we develop that language each season? And I also like the fact that everyone gets to hear the theme tune for another 5 series or whatever.
Yes, absolutely. It's such a highlight. Every time it comes up, you're like, oh, here we go. And I never skip it. There's those shows that you skip. This one is one of the ones where you don't. Thanks, guys, for your insight today. We really appreciate your time, and congratulations on some really amazing work on Slow Horses Season 3.
All right, thanks so much.